Thank you for joining me for the 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act virtual pilgrimage. I'm the Reverend John Borthwick, and I'm delighted to share our uh, third third thing that we're looking at from the 21 Things. This one is created reserves. And so, again, this is a conversation encouraging folks to read the book 21 Things and just join me as I read and sort of encounter what I'm learning around how the Indian Act has impacted the Indigenous community since its inception to even the present day. So, the third thing, number 3, is created reserves. And I just want to give you what Bob Joseph shares as what essentially a reserve is. So, in the Indian Act, he clarifies a reserve is a tract of land set aside that includes treaty agreements for the exclusive use of an Indian band. So, the idea is there's a piece of land that's given or set aside for an Indian band to use exclusively. Now, here's what he differentiates from what's described in paper to what reality is. In reality, Bob says, reserves were created as a means of containing and controlling Indians while providing European settlers full access to the fish and game, water, timber, and mineral resources that had formerly sustained Indian life and culture. So again, we see that by an act of Parliament, the Canadian government moved a people from where they were to a different place. It was a way of controlling, it was a way of relocating, it was a way of moving people off land that settlers, colonizers, wanted to be on. And I'm reminded again, and I know I'm hoping these parallels are helpful, but I'm reminded again of the ways in which within the story of the Great Britain, the story of between the English and the Scottish, or even the Irish, where I'm thinking of the Highland clearances, where people were moved off their land forcibly in some cases, so that this land could be used in a different way. I'm thinking of an imposed famine, the potato famine in Ireland that created such a wave of immigration. These historical moments where people with power and control decided to make specific decisions, to enact things, to make laws that made another people have to move away from where they currently resided. And I wonder sometimes for us, I mean, it's hard for us to imagine. Imagine you're in your home right now. You've been in your home for maybe years. You've gotten used to this place where you live. And then all of a sudden, one day, you're told that you can't live here anymore. You have to live somewhere else. When you ask why, someone merely tells you because that's now the law of the land. Just such a disruption, such a tragic system that was imposed upon Indigenous people who had such a deep connection to the land of their ancestors, and such an imposed restriction on what they were even able to do. Because what would happen when they were moved to these places, not all of the things that they were used to, not all the foodstuffs, not all the resources that they were used to sharing as a gift from Creator, were they able to participate in? Were they able to glean or have to share? And so, in so many ways, this served not only to subjugate, to push aside, literally push aside a people, but it also allowed a people to be sort of encircled, put in a place and said, this is where you stay now. You can't be out here. It has implications around your status as an Indian, whether you really are an Indian by the government's definition. It'll impact people's health and well-being, and has done that to this very day. It has done that by what kind of housing that they drop or they install in these places, the kinds of ways in which sort of a way of life is imposed upon a people. It's just mind blowing to think about the ways in which, by an act of the government, reinforced by a culture and a society that says these people need to be contained, moved aside, placed somewhere, and kept there. Just, it's tragic to see the ways in which this has so much devastated the indigenous community that existed pre-colonization, and to disrupt a people from a place of their ancestors, a place of their people, a place that they were used to, a place that they had a rich and vibrant relationship with, just imposed upon them for the sake of we want the land that you're on. We want to benefit. And yet treaties were drawn up that said that we would have sort of a mutual exchange, but not at all what the settlers, the colonizers had intended. Unfortunately, reserves exist to this day. They have a tremendous impact upon what kind of life and what kind of sense of hope young people on reserves can have or feel or experience. Many of the things that are existing in reserves are a direct result of systemic racism and certainly the Indian Act itself. So, as I reflect on this virtual pilgrimage, we need to remember and recall that this was done with intention. This was done as a way of saying, if you don't stay here, then there could be dramatic repercussions. It's literally like ghettoizing, it's putting people in a place that they have not chosen to be in, not a place that they would want to be in. That's why as we read this book, it needs to be a call to sort of remember and understand it better, but also to think about ways that we could dismantle, take down this oppressive act called the Indian Act. So thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you again next week for 21 Things You May Not Know